Welcome, everybody. Today we have Dr. Richard Mayer, Distinguished Professor of University of California of Santa Barbara. I know everyone watching or listening to this knows who Dr. Mayer is because in all of your classes, in everything that you probably do out there in e-learning, instructional design, or in ed psych, you are citing him. You are using his principles to help guide your design and development. But, I do want to introduce him. He is a professor. He has a lab at Santa Barbara, the Mayer Lab. He has over 500 publications, 30 books. I mean, we're going to get to that. We're going to talk about that because that just blows my mind, the amount of things that you've written. And just if you read my book or any of my work, just in my book, I probably cited him 100 times, and in my articles, probably hundreds. So, you guys have seen his name a lot. So welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for that kind introduction, Ray. I really appreciate it.
When you have a body of work and you've influenced people like myself, we want to, tell you that. So I'm so happy that I've got you here on video, get to talk to you, and it's going to be pretty exciting. So are you ready for some questions?
I am ready.
All right. So you're known as the multimedia person, but I want to step back just a little bit and get to, who you are. So you weren't always in the multimedia. You were a kid at some point. What were you like in high school, in that high school, college, like that, late teens, early 20s? Like, what did you want to do with your life? Were you like, I want to be a professor. I know this. I was a kid. I want to be a professor, and I know this.
Well, I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, kind of in a Jewish enclave. All my friends were probably Jewish. All of my kids in school were just about, but none of the teachers were. And in school, I liked school. I did well, and I was interested in it, mostly science and math. And then, I've gone to Cincinnati public schools from kindergarten through 12th grade.
Okay.
And I transitioned to junior high and high school. I really developed an interest in math because that's a place where you can really excel if you like it. So I enjoyed math. I enjoyed science. This was the time of Sputnik. The United States was really worried about the U.S. catching up with the Russians in math and science. Yeah. So I think I benefited maybe from that, them trying to groom us to be good scientists. So yeah, I would do things like I had a little science lab in my basement, a little chemistry set I used to like to play with, or
sure.
Had little experiments I did in the backyard, kind of digging around, seeing what was there, understanding. I learned a lot about worms. I don't know. I just was always curious about the natural world, and obviously not multimedia learning or even psychology. My dad was an industrial psychologist, so I knew a little bit about psychology from him, and really the importance of taking a scientific approach, taking a data-based approach. So, but kind of through both elementary school and high school, I had a pretty secluded life, I would say. We had our own little world that we lived in that was separate from every place else. Cincinnati was a very segregated school, so I really didn't get to know a lot of people until I went to college. Then in college, that opened up my world. I got to meet a lot of people from lots of different backgrounds. It was just fantastic. I was involved in campus politics. I was in student government, so I got to interact with a lot of people and try and think about what is the purpose of a university, because it really didn't occur to me until college that knowledge that you read in textbooks actually is discovered by somebody. I thought it was there. And in college, I realized there are people here who are actually discovering these things. And that's when I thought, I want to be part of that. I want to discover things. So I think, college was a huge experience. It really broadened me, and it made me understand that universities are there to produce knowledge and to store knowledge and to transmit knowledge.
That's awesome. So so was there someone who like, did you have like an advisor who kind of pushed you? When did you decide to go for that doctorate? Did you go right from your bachelor's degree to like master's PhD, or did you stop and work? Did you take some time off? How did that work?
Well, I sort of planned to take time off. So, I went obviously from high school in Cincinnati to college at Miami University, which is in Oxford, Ohio, just up the road from Cincinnati. And I thought I would, after I graduated, I wanted to do something good for society or something. I signed up to participate in this program that's doesn't really exist anymore, but it was kind of like a domestic Peace Corps, where I was going to be assigned to go to a community in the Ozark Mountain area and help work with kids or something. Something that seemed fulfilling to me at the time. But I also had applied to a few grad schools, and I got into the one I wanted to go to, University of Michigan, and I just thought I better take this.
Yeah.
They made the big mistake of admitting me, and they might not do that again. So I better just take this. So I went up, the freeway. Well, it's not a freeway there, the expressway up to Ann Arbor, and started grad school.
That's awesome. So you get to grad school, you're working on your master's, PhD, at a program, a good established program. When did you decide? So was your first research interest? I know as a young grad student, you're learning and trying to discover yourself. What am I interested in? So how do you get to being this doctoral student to, did you have this interest for how people learn? Was that kind of how you started to get there? Like, was your dissertation around that topic, or were you still trying to figure it out at that point?
I think the first thing I tried to do was just realize why I was there. I think we all in grad school, I don't know if we all do, but I did kind of have that imposter feeling, like, everybody here is so smart and knowledgeable. Yes. What am I doing here?
Yes, I totally felt like that. I get what you're saying.
And not just the grad students, then the faculty. I mean, they're just fantastic. But so part of, I think, a grad school experience is just to build your confidence, to realize maybe you can do this. Mm-hmm. And, the little successes you have are really meaningful. And I try to remember that for my current students, that just little successes that seem trivial to me are a big deal when you're just starting out, because they're kind of helping you realize, I can do this. So I kind of tried over the years, build a little confidence. I guess the first courses I took were I took a course called Models of Thinking. So it's kind of a high level cognition course. I really enjoyed that course. It was taught by my mentor, Jim Greeno. And I thought, okay, I'll do this. Yeah. I had no idea what to do, but it was mainly about problem solving and complex learning. Mm-hmm. I thought, this is a really interesting area. I would really like to know, how can people learn so that they can transfer what they've learned to be able to solve new problems? It's kind of what I got out of that course. And that's kind of the goal that's stuck with me over all these years. It seems like a really simple question. It's kind of, how can you teach for transfer? It's a classic issue in psychology and in education, but it's a really deep question. And it's kind of sustained me over all these years, looking at basically different instructional methods that are intended to help people understand, especially science and math content.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I took my, basically like how do people learn and solve problems course it was an ed psych course at Penn State, and that's what kind of has prompted the rest of my career. That course, like what I learned, I was so fascinated by it. And yeah, we did talk about you a lot in that course and read some of your work.
How embarrassing.
But, so you get your doctorate, you get your first job visiting professor at Indiana, Bloomington, which I assume as visiting professor, you're looking for a full-time job. You eventually, did you have a number of offers? Were you like lucky to get a job at Santa Barbara because that's where you went? Or was that just like, hey, I got a job. It seems like a nice area, good place. I'm going to go here.
Yeah, well, even just getting the job at Indiana was a big step for me. I mean, I'm from the Midwest, so it was nice to be able to stay in the Midwest a little bit. We had our first child, and it was the first grandchild for both of our parents, my wife and I. So we didn't want to move away. So that was nice to be able to be in Bloomington for a couple of years. And Bloomington is kind of just such a lovely college town. And the psych department was so welcoming. And I worked with Frank Russell, who let me use his lab and do any research I wanted in his lab. So that was fantastic. But yeah, it wasn't a permanent job. It was really only supposed to be for 1 year, but they let me stay for 2. I had my choice of going there or working for IBM and at a research center in New York. And my parents were very upset I didn't take that high-paying job with a great corporation. I could not understand why I would take a temporary little teaching job when I could have gotten paid almost twice as much and work for one of the best corporations in the country.
Definitely a risk, yeah.
But I thought I have to give this a try to see what it's like. I love teaching. It was fun working with the students there. And then, I applied for jobs and I got this offer from UCSB. Honestly, I didn't know much about California. I had never been to California before. I was only 20 something, I don't know.
Yeah.
And they flew me out here. I looked around. Oh my gosh, the campus is I'm looking at the Pacific Ocean right now. The ocean's right there.
Yeah, it's one of the most, some of the colleges in California just are the most beautiful places on the earth. While I am in a beach town, so I can't complain. I'm on the East Coast. It's not the same, but man, those schools in California, Pepperdine, Santa Barbara.
But the ocean's here, the mountains are here, palm trees, all the students have their surfboards. It just seemed, to me, kind of blew me away. But the university itself and the department, I could just see we're so research oriented. We have lots of good research facilities, really, and lots of great students to work with. So I knew I had to take this job if they offered it to me, and I'm just grateful, just by some stroke of luck, that I got this offer. And I've been here ever since. I guess I have a lot of staying power. It's turned out to be a good place for me. I've had offers obviously along the time span, but I have so much enjoyed being here and getting to do the research I want to do. I'm a big fan of UC Santa Barbara.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's get into a little bit about, I don't want to, spend a lot of time on the multimedia principle, but I do have a few questions for you that I've been curious about whenever I hear so the multimedia principle, how do you, I get you're doing the research studies on this, but where do you say, I'm going to call this the multimedia principle? How did you come up with that name? And were you nervous when you come up with a name for something? Are people going to adopt this? Are you scared people are going to actually accept it? This is
right.
A thing
that's such a funny thing. At first, I thought, I'll make up this term. Probably nobody's going to follow up on it. Now I feel more confident making up terms.
Sure.
But, you have to be careful because our field already has so many jargon terms.
Yes.
It's not really a contribution to kind of look at the same thing as other people and then give it a different name.
Yes.
That's not the best idea. But, I just kind of, just like my research in general, I just slowly moved into it. I really started looking at advanced organizers and looking, because I thought, this is a way to help people learn better. You kind of activate relevant prior knowledge, and then when you get the lesson, you assimilate that new knowledge to whatever was activated by the advanced organizer. It just seemed like a really compelling idea. So early in my career, I focused a lot on advanced organizers, and kind of one thing I found was that visual spatial advanced organizers were really the most effective. So this is just material you present before a lesson to try to activate relevant prior knowledge so that people can assimilate the lesson to that. So that got me thinking, visual material helps. So why not just present them maybe at the same time? Because, most textbooks have text and illustration. So what would be the best way to do that? And when I looked at science and math textbooks, I calculated how much space is devoted to graphics. About half the space is actually devoted to graphics. But the graphics a lot of them are not really very helpful. Some of them are what I would call decorational. It's
Sure.
what Joel Levin used to call them. Or some are representational. It's like a picture of something. Those are not really that pedagogically helpful. Really, the percentage of really helpful graphics was pretty low. And even those were not designed very well. They had legends, they had captions. That makes it more difficult to follow them. So I thought, oh, maybe I should just study whether graphics and, having graphics and words together would help people learn better, because the act of integrating words and graphics and seeing how they relate to one another, that's really a constructive act of understanding. So that's kind of what got me started. And I think in some articles I might have called it one thing and other articles another. And then eventually I started to convince myself there's something really worthwhile going on here, that I should study some more. So at some point, I did call it multimedia learning. Technically, it should be called multimodal learning, because it's not necessarily different media. When you're talking about a textbook, it's all in that medium.
Sure.
But somehow I just had a better ring to it or something, and I kind of got attached to it.
So who were some of your influences, or who were the people you were like really looking at their research? Like, who were the backbones of this initial research that you were using? Who were some of those authors?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I was influenced by a lot of people.
Sure.
In grad school, like I'm sure a lot of us, I tried to read everything there possibly was in cognitive psychology and educational psychology. And for some reason, even though we're really poor in grad school, I made a deal with myself. I'm not going to deny myself any book. Any book I want, I'm going to buy. I'm sorry. So, but I would say the kind of, quote, contemporary authors at the time I was in grad school that influenced me were probably Merle Whitrock. I think his idea of generative learning was very influential to me. And also was a very kind and supportive person. He didn't have a formal part in my education, but I do feel he was a mentor. He always would talk to me. I could talk about research ideas with him, and I really feel like I basically stole all of his ideas, because my theory is really the same as what he was talking about. So Merle Whitrock, I would say Bob Gagne influenced me as just how to do just really systematic, focused research in instructional design. I didn't really realize that you could actually do research in it. It just seemed like a field where people just had opinions and they just said design things this way. But he actually did research, and he had a really elegant way of thinking about it. He talked about the cognitive processes that are involved, and kind of made me think about the connection between instructional methods and cognitive processes. So that's what I loved about his work. And also he's just so productive. And then who else? Oh, well, Ausubel influenced me. Just had kind of what seemed like an off-the-wall kind of approach to things, but it really resonated with me, the kind of a focus on advanced organizers, that you need to activate relevant prior knowledge and then assimilate the incoming information to that. That made sense to me, and it's also consistent with earlier work like by Bartlett or by Piaget, which also influenced me. So yeah, I think those three were big influencers.
So when do you think that you went from writing about the multimedia principle? When were you like, wow, people are picking this up and like talking about it or writing about it? When did that happen? And what did you think? Like, were you like, wow, this is awesome, like someone's using my stuff?
One thing I've learned is in my career is to not pay too much attention to publicity, or I like it when people say nice things. That makes me feel good, but I try not to take it too seriously.
Sure.
I think the point is, to me, is I'm curious. I have a lot of things I'm interested in. I want to kind of understand how these things work. So that's kind of what keeps me going, just kind of pursuing my research interests, my research questions that occur to me. And I don't really have a long-term plan. I just kind of one thing leads to the next. So, I mean, one thing I've learned is, just don't, don't, don't. Oh, my dad used to say, don't read your own press releases.
Yeah.
So I try not to do that. And by the same token, I try not to take criticism that hard either, because in our business, we get a lot of criticism. We get papers rejected. We get our grant proposals rejected. I've probably had more papers rejected than accepted by far. So you have to develop kind of a thick skin and also realize sometimes reviewers are actually right. Okay, that's depressing. And sometimes, you're right, and you just have to figure out how to explain things better and maybe collect more data to convince more people. But that's another thing I didn't realize in our field. It's a very social enterprise. You have to kind of we're all part of we're in this together, and we communicate with each other, and we have to kind of share our ideas and see which ideas make the most sense and how we should shape them. So I've been very heavily influenced by colleagues and students who, helped me shape my ideas.
Yeah. So getting into that, your research. So 500 publications and 30 books. I just did a little math just for fun. That would be publishing something every 3 weeks for 30 years. So we're talking literally you had to be working on multiple, and I know a lot of faculty, we work on multiple things a lot and try to get a lot out. And I do know professors doing like 10, 15 publications a year, but you've consistently done that throughout your whole entire career.
Yeah.
Do you sleep? Are you, what is your process? How do you publish so often? Like what has driven you and motivated you to be able to do this?
Well, I think what drives me and probably drives all of us is a curiosity. I think that's where you start. You start with, I'm just curious. I do want to understand, how does learning work and how can we help people learn better? Those just seem like such simple things, but they're complicated and they're issues that we've been grappling with for 100 years. So they're kind of deep issues, but I have a lot of curiosity about how can we promote learning? And then even once you start to figure that out, then I start thinking, well, where does affect come in? Where do social processes come in? Where does metacognition come in? So there's always things that, your curiosity keeps adding to the mix. When you feel you're starting to make progress, then no, there are all these other things too. So I think it's curiosity that has kept me going. And, it's just, I feel so fortunate to have this kind of job where you can come into work and kind of pursue any question you want. Nobody tells you what question to pursue. You just have to figure it out and see if the world finds any value in it, whether they'll accept your papers and recite your papers. So that's kind of what keeps me going, I think. And, being able to have, really smart students to interact with and talk these things about, and having just really great colleagues from all over the world really to interact with, that keeps me going, because that gives me people to interact with.
So when you have an idea, do you approach your colleagues or your students to kind of help you say, is this a good idea, or do you want to help, or how does that, or do you just like, this is a good idea, I'm going with it?
No, I'm pretty sure it's not a good idea. If I just I think you have to. I feel I have to talk to people about any ideas we have. So it's so lovely to have. I mean, students are so wonderful to have people to talk to, or so knowledgeable. And also, I've learned a lot from colleagues. At first, just kind of mentors, kind of superstars in the field that took the time to actually help me.
Yeah.
And now I feel like I have a few opportunities to do that, to try to mentor people who are starting more in our field. I've learned more from them than they've learned from me, but they probably don't realize that. And that is really helpful, just to be able to talk and kind of talk through ideas. Sometimes you learn from just getting your paper rejected and seeing, I really need to rethink that. So that's another source of guidance. But I mean, this is something they don't teach you in grad school, is that what we do is a very collaborative social activity. My image in grad school was I'll get a lab and I'll sit in there and do research all day. But that is not how it works. I'm always a part of a big multidisciplinary team. Each person kind of has different things to contribute to it, and we kind of work together and try to explain things to each other. Just the act of doing all that is what I think creates good research.
So what is your work-life balance like? Do you, you're doing a lot. Is it just, you're pretty comfortable, or do you feel like, oh, I'm doing too much? Like, do you have a good work-life balance? Have you had a good schedule? Do you schedule things out? You're like, Monday I write, Tuesday I do this, Thursday I teach.
I think that is super important because it's so easy to get stressed out in this job and feel like all these things to do, I'll never get them done. So yeah, I do exactly that. I try to, time is a really precious resource. So I have to kind of look at it as this is a resource. Some of the time, so I do try to schedule parts of the week for different things. So the mornings I try to devote to writing or thinking or reading. Try not to schedule appointments or, any commitments like that. I'd like to get out 2 or 3 pages a day. If I feel I can do that, I've had a good morning. Yeah. I don't have really high goals. That seems like not much, but if you do a little bit each day, it starts to add up.
That's a lot. That's good. 2 to 3 pages a day is awesome. I mean, that's good. That's how you're getting those papers done continuously.
Maybe. Then afternoons, I try to devote to teaching, meeting with students, doing all the other wonderful things we get to do in our job, responding to email, which takes a lot of time, but I think is important. And committee work, things like that, I try to do in the afternoon. Evenings, maybe read articles or read things I'm interested in, something like that. But hang out with my wife.
Sure.
Walk the dog, have dinner with my wife. I think it's important. And also weekends, I try to just keep for
family stuff.
Yeah, family stuff. I do like journal reviews in the weekend because to me that's kind of relaxing. I don't know, criticizing other people's work.
Yeah, you're the person that wrote all the red stuff on my paper.
But I do try to, segregate time. I think that's really important. And I feel you can't always be on. Sometimes you just have to unplug. Now it's not work time now. Yeah. I'll get to this because I think sometimes you have an inflated sense of how important you are and how important it is to just keep doing things. I have to tell myself, life will go on if there's one less chapter for me in the world. I don't, and probably to me, family comes first. So anything involving my family, I would time-wise always put first. And I think that's worked for me. I try to schedule things. I have, I don't have it with me. I use a little paper calendar thing, one of those little at-a-glance booklet things. It's just pocket size. Sure. It has the whole month, and I write my schedule in there. I don't like an electronic one because sometimes I can't access it the way I want, and I can fill in that calendar. So I like to use that calendar. Each day, I try to have a schedule of what I want to do that day. I put it on an index card, put it in my pocket or somewhere. So I kind of see what is it I'm trying to accomplish today. And then I also have another yellow pad where I have my outstanding tasks, and I kind of try to prioritize those. And it really makes you feel good when you can cross one off. That makes my day. Oh, I crossed that off. So that's kind of how I try to do things. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I do a very similar. I do all mine on the computer, but it's very similar. I have my calendar. I have a task list. I feel like every time I cross one of those big things off, I've just added 3 more. So I get that problem.
Of course.
But no, you have to manage your time. People will ask me how do you do all this stuff? How do I have time to surf? And how do I have time for my kids? And I say, you just have to, I have surfing in my schedule because if I didn't, it wouldn't happen.
And I think, I don't know about you, but it makes me more productive if I actually have recreation time.
Yes,
I like
you
to
have to.
I like to do mountain biking. I find that really fun, something I can still do. It's easy, and and around here there's a lot of good places to go. And then and even have ideas while I'm doing it, even though I'm not trying to.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it yeah, I think you have to do some kind of recreation. You can't be
Yeah,
working.
yeah. No, I'm all about hobbies. I think they're a part of life and enjoyment, and our jobs become a hobby too. They're just one of our. I feel like that as a faculty member, being able to make my job my life. But
Yeah,
yes,
I'm glad you said that, because that's the way I feel too. My job's kind of, it's like a really fun hobby.
yes. And it has to be with the level of motivation you've kept up. I mean, you have to enjoy it, or else you wouldn't be able to do that. You can't just do. I try to tell people you're not going to be a successful professor for money or just for something. And not that the money's there, but like you have to do it because you really enjoy it, or you just won't last.
Exactly. Yeah. Because I mean, it's a lot of people find it a stressful
It
job.
is.
Kind of, you don't get a lot of guidance. You don't get a lot of positive feedback along the way. So yeah, it's tough. So you have to kind of have some internal strength that you like this, you have confidence in yourself, and you're just gonna go ahead with it.
So getting into, I just mentioned the word finance. So since you become like this person who people look at for so many different things, is that is there like a do you find like there's a big financial benefit outside of being a faculty member? Like, do people want you for consulting, or what are like some interesting things like you've been able to do, like keynotes or just different things like that? You mentioned that maybe there were places that had offered you positions. Like, what kind of stuff do you find that has been offered to you that maybe isn't something traditionally other faculty are always going to see or get?
I mean, to me, what I want, I'm the happiest when I'm in my lab collecting data.
Yeah.
That's or or writing it up, explaining what it is. So that's what I want to spend my time doing. So I like consulting at a kind of a low level, because it exposes me to the real world,
Mm-hmm.
kind of some of the real world problems and issues that are out there, and also exposes me to a lot of really interesting people who are, I mean, I consult for a lot of startup companies
Yeah.
trying to do ed tech. So it's
Yeah,
really
that's
fun to
fun.
talk to people who have these great ideas, and but maybe don't know much about cognitive science
Mm-hmm.
or how the mind works. So I think we have value to add to a
Absolutely.
lot of these enterprises. So I like doing that, but I do not want that to dominate my life, and I don't want to make decisions based on money. That they pay me a salary here, that's fine. I don't. I really like to do consulting because I get something out of it,
Yeah.
and I feel like maybe I'm adding value to something practical that might actually happen. I, I'm I like giving talks too. It's always nice to get invited to give talks places. Virtual talks over these last year and a half have been great, because you don't
Yeah.
have to get on a plane. You can just give a talk, say hello. Um,
Exactly. No, definitely. I think it's opened up a lot of new doors, a lot of new ways for us to communicate with one another. Absolutely.
but I'm not a great traveler. I like being there. I just don't like getting there.
Yeah, I think a lot. I'm kind of the same way. I can't. I do not like. I haven't been on a plane in like 10 years, and I don't like it. Like I try to avoid it. So I get it.
I mean, early in my career, I felt I've got to do this. I've got to get my name out there or something. So if somebody invites me, I have to go no
Yeah,
matter
can't
what.
say no.
But now it's fun. They tell me, oh, it's a keynote address. So it's still the same talk. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it can be a keynote or a
But
webinar,
it,
but
it makes you feel more important that it's keynote. So those are fun, and it's fun to meet people and talk to people about their ideas. So I love doing that. But it's a big time sink. So
yeah.
I try not to do that too much, because, like I said, it takes a lot of time away from other activities.
So do you pay attention to like any of your articles or books, like, oh, my book sold this much, like, or my article was cited like 1,000 times or something? Do you pay attention at all to any of that stuff? One of the things I'm always curious about from people in our field are like, what's a good like when you write a book, like what's a good number of sales? Like no one talks about this, and it's not on our resumes. It doesn't come up during tenure and promotion, and I'm just like, none of us know this. If the top people don't tell us, we don't have anything to know, like if we're doing okay or not.
Right. When you look up on Amazon, oh, my book's number 3,205,000.
Yeah, we just don't know. And at least there's some stat there. Like we're getting something.
So yeah, I'm kind of embarrassed to say, yeah, I probably do look at the citation ratings. It's embarrassing to do that, but it gives me some idea of which articles seem to be getting some response, and
it's important data, absolutely.
And yeah, and it makes you feel good to see people cite your work.
I mean, you could look at any of my papers, and I've got at least like 10 to 15 citations for you in each one. So.
Well, thank you.
There are a lot of people citing your stuff, but it's interesting to see, like, well, this is like what people are really looking, like this article for whatever reason is just like getting out there, and it's interesting that I think that data is fascinating to see. I think it's helpful for us to guide our research.
It is, and books, it's another issue. I mean, you're right. Academic books don't sell that many copies.
Exactly.
I feel if it sells 5,000 or 10,000, I'm super happy. I don't know about the publisher; they make money.
I mean, that's a lot for an academic book in our field. So that's
right.
That's a very high number.
They can make money from just 2,000 or 3,000, but to me, I would like it to be at kind of that level. But just to be humble, if you think about it, somebody who just writes an article in the New York Times or something, they're gonna have so many more readers than anything.
It's crazy to think about it like that. It is crazy to think about, how we publish and distribute stuff versus a newspaper or magazine or the nitely news. It is crazy to think about. Yes,
we have a very small market of people who are interested in our ideas. So even to probably just hit a few is probably, if I could just influence anybody, I'd be happy.
Yes. Well, and your work is definitely expands way beyond our field. Like I do a lot of stuff in gaming and esports, and your research is very large in all the gaming research. When we talk about like learning through games or presenting any type of game information, your research is the backbone of that. So at least part of the backbone of that. So, you're definitely expanding into other and larger fields, which I think is nice to see, really with any media. And that's what's fascinating about multimedia and your research, is that it's not just instructional design or ed psych. It's anyone, it's communication, it's anyone using any form of media, really. Like, how do we communicate messages or learn from them? That's where it really branches out into everything.
And I think that's really in a way, that's what education really is. It's about communication. So it's a kind of a broader issue, but games, that I just kind of got interested in games maybe about 10 years ago or so.
Yeah.
It seemed like there are a lot of claims made for how great games are going to be for education, but not a lot of research. So, I mean, my theme is always, let's take a scientific approach. Let's try and look at the evidence or generate evidence to see, when are games helpful? What are the features of games that make them effective? Because I think that's, the overall umbrella of what I'm doing, and I think what a lot of us are doing, is applying the science of learning to education. So we have a science behind us. We know a lot about how the mind works already, and we also know how to do scientific research that actually can answer questions. So we can just apply that from the science of learning to educational issues. I think that's what we contribute as educational psychologists. I think we're really moving both education and psychology ahead by doing that.
Now, you've got to work with some really interesting people throughout the years, some big names in cognition, learning, multimedia. What are some of, do you have any any cool stories about working with any of these people? Who was like really good to work? Like, who was just like, wow, this person just like everything you did, they just produced gold, like just great to work with. Like, do you have any cool information about anyone?
I've had some really wonderful students to work with over the years who, I've learned a lot from them, and they really helped me move ahead. I've had really great mentors, in graduate school and even undergraduate, and also just people who, for some reason, took me under their wing when I was just assistant professor. So that's really been helpful. People, and I've gotten a chance to collaborate with a lot of really great people around the world, and I just have learned how international our enterprise is. I mean, there are people everywhere, all around the world, who are, dealing with really interesting issues in our field, and sometimes I get to work with them, and that has been a real joy for me. And that's another thing I didn't realize as a grad student, that you get to work with all these people, even though they're very well known. If you have some idea that interests them, they'll work with you. So I don't really have any great stories, maybe, but I will say that's been kind of a highlight of my career, to get to work with all these people.
Yeah, I think maybe 7 or 8 years ago, I was on an email chain you were on, and I was like blown away that the people who were on this email chain, it was like John Sweller, you, and like several other people were on this email chain. And I was like, how you guys were someone on the email chain was asking me about cognitive load, and I had just published a study on cognitive load. And so you guys were all on this email chain, and I was like, this is amazing that these people are all on this email chain right now. It's like everyone that I write about, they're all actually interested in what and I just couldn't believe that you were all on the email chain. And it was just fascinating. Like, I have all these there's these little stories, little things that happen that just were like big moments that I just thought were fascinating. So,
Yeah, because you asked probably an interesting question, and everybody wanted to get their 2 cents.
Yeah, it's fun when that kind of stuff happens. So you have a lab now. What does that mean in education, in psych, when you say you have a lab? Like, what does that really mean? What do you do? Is it just like, I say a lab to a scientist, I picture like them doing like experiments with like test tubes. Yeah, exactly. But what does this mean in educational psychology? Like, what do you really do there, and what does this mean?
So, I mean, I really feel fortunate. We have really good resources here. So we have individual labs, and we also have, multi-user labs in our department. So in our basement, we have fMRI machines. So if I want to try and deal with cognitive neuroscience, I have colleagues who are very talented in that area, and we have the equipment. So that's really nice. We have a virtual reality lab, a multi-user virtual reality lab. So there's expertise there if I want to work with them. And there's other labs too. But my lab, I get to set up the way I want. So, the department gives me this space. I have like 3 fairly large rooms. Yeah. I have them set up, the kind of research we do. You sit at a booth and you're looking at a computer. So they're set up. One room has 5 PCs in booths. The other room has 5 iMacs in booths. The other room has eye tracking systems set up right now. It's more for just running one subject at a time. We also have a virtual reality set up in the larger room so that you can use the HTC Vive or Oculus Quest. It's not a tremendous amount of room, but there is enough room to walk around. So we can use that room for VR experiments. So it gives us a space, and then my grad students can schedule rooms when they want to do their studies and have subjects come in and be in our studies.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So it's great. I mean, it's really helpful to have. Our work doesn't cost that much. When I see friends who do cognitive neuroscience, it's a lot more expensive. But
yes,
you need some equipment. So I really feel fortunate to have an eye tracking lab, have these computer stations, and so we can do game research and such, and to have a VR system. We have a portable EEG system my colleagues who really do this think it's kind of a toy, because they
Yeah.
have much sophisticated labs
Yeah,
that,
those are pretty cool. I mean, that's really fascinating. I think the EEG stuff is a really interesting. The cognitive science is a really interesting topic. It's something I'm interested in. Not maybe my thing, maybe not what I'm going to do, but I think it's really cool.
it is. It has possibilities. It's we'll see. It's the whole field of educational neuroscience has not really taken off,
Sure.
in my opinion. It's there. It has possibilities. Even E.L. Thorndike talked about educational neuroscience in his early textbooks. He has
Yeah.
like a whole section on how the nervous system works, but it just hasn't yet had a big influence on us. So, but I think there's something there that might be helpful to us. So I'm not going to give up on it.
I've seen, I was talking to some of the people at Garmin not too long ago, and I said, like, we can use these biometrics on our watches to like see if students are stressed and what kind of presentation like stresses people. And I was like, there's so much there that we could do with this kind of in data. I was like, they're not easy studies. They involve a lot of equipment. It's lots of data to sort through, but I think it's cool. I think there's something there with biometrics and that EEG stuff. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, the biometrics we've tried to use. I mean, they're messy.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of technical problems with this. Like we use like heart rate variability, EDA, what's that, electrodermal activity. But they're messy. They're not. So there's a lot of technical issues, and then there's conceptual issues about, okay, what does this actually mean?
Yes.
That's the really hard part. Okay, you have greater heart rate variability. Exactly, how do you interpret that? What's that? So, yeah, but I do think there's some value in it, and we need to kind of work through that.
Okay, so just a couple final questions, and we're going to end. But I just have to ask you a few things. So, what do you think? What is your greatest work? What do people think your greatest work is? Okay. Like, the one you get like asked about or cited the highest versus maybe what was your favorite work?
Oh, I try not to think about questions like that. I mean, I mainly think about what are the research questions I really want to answer? What do I really want to understand? And I kind of really want to understand if you are going to try to teach somebody something, how would you do that? If let's say you're going to put together a 15-minute online presentation teaching something, what do we know about about the research evidence and how people learn that would drive that? So to me, it's more an issue of what are the research questions that are really fun and that we can actually contribute to. And I think it's those kinds of questions, kind of instructional design questions about, what's the best way to help people learn conceptual and technical material.
And something else, I guess I should have asked you this earlier, but I just kind of thought of it as you were talking. When you were doing this research on multimedia, really before the computer was available to everyone, you were looking at you were telling me you were looking at textbooks. So how much did like the computer, when all of a sudden in like the mid 90s, when we started to have decent graphics, like how much did that impact your curiosity for this topic?
A lot, because that's when we started to have these great software programs that you could actually buy. I mean, up until around the 90s, you needed like a really super studio to create anything. Now you can create your own animations. You can create all kind. I mean, it's a lot of work, but you theoretically can do that with the software that's available and with the computer power that we have. But talking about when I first came here, I had the first microcomputer. It was called an Altair 8080. This was my introduction to doing research with computers. It had toggle switches. You had a load BASIC. That was the program it used.
I remember
with paper
BASIC.
tape. It was like this 18-minute paper tape. You had it loaded into the computer and toggle what memory location I was going to go into. You had to understand a lot about how computers work. And we didn't even have displays at that time. We had to use like a teletype to
Wow.
get our data out. Yeah, it was fun. And the same thing with, yeah, the early research in multimedia.
Hmm.
I'm not really a big technology person. I think, technology is there to serve us.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's not, I mean, cutting edge technology is great, but we need to see how can we use that to help people learn better. I'm not, I don't think it's technology that helps people learn. I just want to understand what instructional methods can we use with technology that will be more effective. But you're right. It is kind of fun to get involved with, with emerging technologies. Makes me interact with people who know a lot more about it than I do.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, definitely. I have a lot of fun with the VR and the game and seeing my students' motivation towards that stuff and trying to figure out where it's going and watching my kids watch people play games and just fascinated by what the current generation is going to be like. So it's interesting. But this has been an awesome talk. I'm honestly just like so happy that I got to talk to you for 1 second. I was happy when was on that email chain like 10 years ago. That was like great. So, it's really been a pleasure, and I learned a lot. And I think that this is, you gave a lot of good advice. Some of the key points I picked up on were just your motivation and curiosity is really what drove you. And I think that piece of advice for anyone considering faculty or just life in general is a good piece of advice to follow that curiosity.
That's right. I think that's very good point. I've really enjoyed talking to you too, Ray.
Yeah, thank you very much.